My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and for 12 years I lived my life according to one simple rule: save today so tomorrow can finally belong to me. Every paycheck followed the same path. Rent for my tiny apartment above an old laundromat, utilities, groceries, gas. Whatever remained went straight into my savings account. Friends invited me on vacations I couldn't afford. Co-workers upgraded to new cars while I drove the same aging sedan with windows that still rolled down by hand. I skipped dinners out, bought clothes only when something wore out, and made coffee at home every morning. People called me disciplined. The truth was simpler. I was tired of living in places that never felt like mine. By the spring I turned 34, I had finally saved enough for a 20% down payment. After months of searching, I found a small 2-bedroom cottage on Linden Street. It wasn't luxurious. The porch leaned slightly to one side, the kitchen cabinets were older than I was, and the backyard fence desperately needed paint. I loved it immediately. Closing day felt unreal. As I signed the last document, my realtor smiled. "Congratulations, Claire. You're officially a homeowner." I stared at the keys resting on the table. For a moment, I couldn't move. Those 2 little pieces of metal represented 12 years of sacrifice. Driving to the cottage, I unlocked the front door and stepped into complete silence. Empty rooms echoed with every footstep. Sunlight poured through the living room windows, warming the hardwood floors. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because for the first time in my life, something belonged entirely to me. Standing in my kitchen, I took a picture of the keys and sent it to the family group chat. "Surprise! I bought my first house today." Then I set my phone on the counter and walked from room to room, imagining where everything would go. The dining table near the window, bookshelves against the living room wall, a reading chair in the spare bedroom. 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated. 11 missed calls, all from my parents. I smiled. Mom was probably excited. Dad would definitely ask about the roof, the plumbing, and whether I'd checked the water heater. I called back. She answered before the first ring finished. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I laughed softly. "So, aren't you going to say congratulations?" Her voice came back cold enough to make me straighten where I stood. "You bought a house without talking to us?" I frowned. I wanted it to be a surprise. "You made this decision completely alone?" "I'm 34, Mom." Another long silence followed. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You have no idea what you've just done." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, confused. Outside, children laughed somewhere down the street. Inside, my beautiful little cottage suddenly felt strangely quiet. At that moment, I thought my parents were simply hurt because I hadn't involved them in such a big decision. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 weeks later, an 8-year-old little girl would accidentally reveal a secret my entire family had been hiding from me for months. And the truth would change everything. To understand why my mother's reaction shook me so deeply, you first have to understand the role I'd spent my entire life playing in my family. I wasn't the loud one, I wasn't the rebellious one, I was the dependable one. For 12 years, I'd worked as a senior accountant at a respected firm in Dayton, Ohio. My coworkers trusted me with the most complicated files because they knew I never missed a detail. At home, my life was just as predictable. I woke up at 6 every morning, packed my lunch, brewed my own coffee, and drove my aging sedan to work. I rarely complained, rarely splurged, and always kept my promises. That same reputation followed me home. Every spring, I prepared my parents' tax returns. When my Aunt Linda received confusing insurance paperwork, she called me. When my grandmother couldn't understand a Medicare letter, it landed on my kitchen table before anyone even asked if I had time. "Give it to Claire," my mother would say with a proud smile. "She'll figure it out." Everyone nodded. Everyone smiled. And I smiled too. For years, I thought being needed meant being loved. My younger sister, Megan, loved teasing me about it. "Our family doesn't need Google," she'd joke at Sunday dinner. "We have Claire." The room always erupted in laughter. I laughed too, because that's what reliable people do. What I didn't realize was that reliability slowly turns into expectation. People stop asking for help. They simply assume you'll provide it. Looking back now, I know exactly when that lesson began. I was 12 years old when I started babysitting 2 neighborhood children after school. $5 an hour felt like a fortune. Every dollar I earned went into an old shoebox hidden beneath sweaters in my bedroom closet. I wasn't saving for anything extravagant. Just a blue 10-speed bicycle displayed in the hardware store window downtown. Every afternoon, I'd open the box, count my money, and imagine riding that bike through the neighborhood. Then, one Monday after school, I picked up the shoebox. It felt lighter. Much lighter. Nearly half the money was gone. Confused, I walked into the kitchen where my mother sat waiting at the table. She gently reached for my hand. "The water heater broke this weekend," she explained softly. "Dad's hours were cut at work. We had to use some of your savings." I looked down at the empty spot in the shoebox where my dreams had been. "You should have asked me," I whispered. She smiled sadly. "We knew you'd understand." Then she looked toward my father and Aunt Linda, who were standing nearby. "Claire always understands." They both smiled at me proudly. For a 12-year-old girl desperate to make her family happy, that smile felt like a medal. I swallowed my disappointment. "The water heater was more important," I said. "Everyone praised me for being so mature. No one ever replaced the money. I never bought the bicycle. What I gained instead was something far heavier. I learned that in my family, love wasn't something freely given. It was something earned by sacrificing what mattered to me." And without realizing it, I spent the next 22 years becoming the daughter who always understood. I just didn't know that one day my family would expect me to sacrifice far more than a bicycle. For the next 2 weeks, I tried to convince myself my mother's reaction had simply come from surprise. Surely she'd calm down. Surely everything would go back to normal. Instead, it got stranger. Every phone call ended awkwardly. Every Sunday dinner felt tense. And my mother kept bringing up one particular house. "The 4-bedroom on Oak Ridge Lane is still available," she said one evening while drying dishes. I frowned. "How do you know that?" "Oh, people talk." I let it go. The following Sunday, she mentioned it again. "It's in an excellent school district." I laughed. "I don't have kids, Mom." "You never know what the future holds." Her answer felt rehearsed. The strange part was that I'd never told anyone I was looking for a house. Not my parents, not my sister, not even my closest friends. Only my realtor knew. Yet somehow my mother seemed to know exactly which listings were selling and which ones weren't. It made no sense. Thankfully, my little cottage quickly became my safe place. Every evening after work, I'd unlock the front door, kick off my shoes, and simply enjoy the silence. There was no television blaring, no one asking me to solve a problem, no stack of paperwork waiting on the kitchen table. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts. I painted the spare bedroom a soft sage green. I planted flowers along the front walkway. I bought a second-hand rocking chair for the porch. Every small change made the house feel more like home. Then came another Sunday dinner. The atmosphere inside my parents' house felt unusually stiff. Dad barely spoke. My sister, Megan, avoided looking at me. Her husband, Daniel, kept complimenting the food as though he were trying to distract everyone from something. Halfway through dessert, my mother casually said, "The 4-bedroom on Oak Ridge still hasn't sold." I looked up from my pie. "You really like that house? It would be perfect for a growing family." I smiled politely. "Well, good thing someone will buy it." The room fell silent. Dad suddenly became very interested in refilling his coffee. Megan stared at her plate. Even Daniel stopped eating. Before I could ask what was wrong, my 8-year-old niece, Emma, looked up with the innocent confidence only children have. "Aunt Claire," she asked happily, "is your new house the one we're moving into?" The spoon slipped from my hand. "What?" Emma blinked. "Mom said when you got the new house, Cody and I would share the big bedroom." "Megan!" my mother snapped sharply. Emma jumped. I thought I could tell." "Honey," Megan interrupted quickly, "finish your dessert." No one looked surprised. No one asked Emma what she meant, because everyone already knew. Everyone except me. I slowly looked around the table. Dad couldn't meet my eyes. Daniel stared at the floor. My mother folded her napkin with calm, practiced movements. And in that heavy silence, I realized something that made my stomach twist. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a secret my entire family had been keeping from me. And somehow, my new house was at the center of it. I couldn't stop thinking about Emma's words. "Is your new house the one we're moving into?" The question echoed in my mind all the way home. Children don't invent plans like that. They repeat what they've heard. For 2 days, I replayed that dinner over and over. Every uncomfortable glance, every forced smile, every awkward silence suddenly made sense. Someone had been planning something, and somehow I was the last person to find out. On Tuesday evening, I drove back to my parents' house to return a raincoat my youngest niece had left in my car. I wasn't planning another confrontation. I just wanted to drop it off and leave. The front door was unlocked, so I stepped inside. The television was playing softly in the living room while my mother and Megan folded laundry. The children were in the kitchen finishing their snacks. Emma spotted me first. "Aunt Claire!" She ran over and hugged me. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, smiling despite everything. She climbed onto one of the kitchen stools while I poured myself a glass of water. Without any hesitation, she asked, "Did you buy the wrong house?" I looked at her. "What do you mean?" She frowned, confused. "The big house." "What big house?" "The one Grandma wanted." I felt my heart begin to pound. "What did Grandma say?" Emma answered with complete innocence. "She said when you bought the big house, we'd all move in together. Cody and I were going to get the bedroom upstairs, and Mommy and Daddy would have the room next to yours." She smiled proudly. "I already picked which room I wanted." "When did Grandma tell you this?" "Before Christmas." Before Christmas. It was now the end of March. For months, my future had been discussed around family tables while I knew absolutely nothing about it. I slowly walked into the living room. Everyone looked up. No one smiled. I took a deep breath. "I want to ask one question." The room became perfectly still. "Were Megan and Daniel planning to move into my house?" Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. My father lowered his eyes. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck without speaking. Megan looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Only my mother remained calm. She sighed heavily, almost with relief. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." I stared at her. "So it's true." She nodded. "The plan was simple." She spoke as though she were explaining something obvious. You were supposed to buy the 4-bedroom on Oak Ridge Lane. Megan and Daniel would move in with you while they rebuilt their lives, just for a few years. You made this plan. I could barely get the words out. Without asking me? My mother's expression filled with genuine confusion. We're family, Claire. Family helps each other. I felt my chest tighten. You decided where I would live. She nodded. We knew you'd understand. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything else, because suddenly I realized something painful. They hadn't forgotten to ask me. They had never intended to. In their minds, the answer had already belonged to them. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The only sound in the room was the ticking of the old clock above the fireplace. I looked at my mother, searching her face for some sign that this had all been a misunderstanding. There wasn't one. She truly believed she'd done nothing wrong. I took a slow breath. Mom, why didn't you just ask me? She looked genuinely puzzled. Because we already knew what you'd say. I shook my head. No, you didn't. You've always helped this family, she replied calmly. You always do. Those words landed like a weight on my chest. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. For 22 years, I'd solved everyone's problems without asking for anything in return. Somewhere along the way, my kindness had quietly become an obligation. My younger sister finally spoke. Claire, we're not asking you to give up your life forever. I turned toward her. But you weren't asking at all. Tears filled Megan's eyes. We didn't know how. Before I could answer, my mother stepped forward. Then sell the cottage. I blinked. What? The 4-bedroom on Oak Ridge is still available. We can still fix this. Fix this. As if my home were a mistake. As if 12 years of saving, planning, and sacrificing had been nothing more than the wrong answer on a test. My house doesn't need fixing, I said quietly. It's exactly the home I wanted. But it's too small, my mother insisted. For who? She stared at me. For the family. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because it suddenly became painfully clear that no one in this room had ever considered one simple question. What did Claire want? To them, my spare bedroom wasn't my future office. It wasn't a guest room. It wasn't a place where I dreamed of reading books beside a sunny window. It was simply empty space waiting to be assigned. Megan wiped away a tear. You have 2 bedrooms, and you have 3 children. The math doesn't work. I looked at my sister with sadness. The math isn't the problem. She frowned. What do you mean? I mean, no one has asked whether I want 5 other people living in my home. The room fell silent again. Because I was right. Not one person had asked. My father quietly looked down at his hands. Daniel stood against the wall, avoiding everyone's eyes. Even he seemed uncomfortable now. I picked up my purse. I love all of you, I said softly. I always will. But this house is mine. My mother folded her arms. So that's your final answer? I nodded. No. It was the first time in my life I'd said that word without apologizing afterward, without explaining, without softening it. Just no. I walked to the front door. Behind me, my mother's voice echoed through the hallway. You're choosing a house over your own family, Claire. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Then I turned around one last time. No, I said calmly. I'm choosing the life I spent 12 years building. I walked out. As I drove home, tears blurred the road ahead. Part of me believed the hardest conversation was finally over. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because in my family, no wasn't the end of the argument. It was the beginning of a campaign. I expected everyone to cool down after that night. I thought a few days apart would give us all time to think. Instead, the pressure grew stronger. The following Saturday, my doorbell rang just after noon. Standing on my porch was my Aunt Linda, smiling warmly as she balanced a casserole dish in her hands. "I made your favorite chicken casserole," she said. "Mind if I come in?" I stepped aside. For the next hour, she admired my little cottage while somehow managing to criticize it at the same time. "It's cozy," she said, looking around the living room. "But I can see why your mother was hoping for something bigger." I didn't answer. She placed the casserole on my kitchen counter and sat down. "Claire, your parents are under so much pressure. Megan's family can't stay in that crowded house forever." "I know. So, maybe you should think about helping." "I am thinking about helping," she smiled hopefully. "Then you'll change your mind?" I quietly shook my head. "No." Her smile faded. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." After she left, I stared at the untouched casserole for a long time. 2 days later, another relative stopped by with homemade lasagna. Then a church friend called to tell me she was praying for my heart to soften. Another cousin left a voicemail. Family comes before everything else. The strange part wasn't what they said. It was how they said it. Every person used almost the exact same words. "Family helps family." "Your mother is heartbroken." "God blesses those who share." It felt rehearsed, as though someone had written a speech and everyone was reading from the same script. Every conversation ended the same way. No one asked how I was settling into my new home. No one asked if I was happy. No one asked what I dreamed about while saving for 12 long years. The only thing that mattered was what my house could do for someone else. One rainy afternoon, I drove to my parents' house to return a jacket Emma had forgotten in my car. The front door was open. I stepped inside quietly. No one noticed me. The scene before me stopped me cold. 7 people were trying to live inside a house built for 4. An air mattress leaned against the living room wall. Shoes covered the hallway. Toys filled every corner. My father sat silently at the kitchen table, rubbing his tired eyes. My mother stood at the sink, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Megan stirred a pot of soup while trying to help Cody with homework at the same time. For the first time, I saw how overwhelmed they truly were. My heart ached. Maybe I had been too stubborn. Maybe selling my house really was the answer. I walked back outside and sat in my car. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone. My realtor's number appeared on the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button. One phone call, one decision, and everything could go back to the way it used to be. Then another thought stopped me. A simple question. Why is my house the only solution anyone has considered? There had to be another way. And if there was, I was going to find it. That night, I opened my laptop, created a new spreadsheet, and began searching for answers. For the first time since buying my cottage, I wasn't trying to defend my home. I was trying to save my family, without losing myself. Once I made up my mind, I approached the situation the only way I knew how, with facts instead of emotions. If the real problem was housing, then there had to be practical solutions. I spent the entire weekend researching. I searched rental listings within 10 miles of my parents' neighborhood. I compared prices, school districts, and commute times. By Sunday evening, I had found 6 apartments that would fit Megan and Daniel's family. 3 of them had 3 bedrooms, and one was only 10 minutes from Emma's elementary school. Then I built a budget. I listed Daniel's current income, Megan's part-time wages, estimated monthly expenses, and calculated exactly how much they would need to get back on their feet. I even found a nonprofit program that helped families recover after small businesses failed. By Monday night, everything was neatly organized inside a blue presentation folder. For the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. Maybe this would finally end the fighting. Tuesday evening, I drove to my parents' house. Megan answered the door. "I brought something," I said, smiling. She invited me into the kitchen. I slid the folder across the table. "I think I found a way." She opened it slowly. The smile on her face disappeared page by page. She looked at the apartment listings, then the budget, then the financial assistance information. Finally, she looked back at me. "You made us a spreadsheet?" "It's not just a spreadsheet," I replied gently. "These are real apartments. I can pay the application fees and help with the security deposit. I'll even help you move." She closed the folder. "We don't need apartments." I blinked. "What?" "We need family." The words hit me harder than shouting ever could. I suddenly understood something I hadn't wanted to believe. This had never been about finding a place to live. It had always been about my house. The folder wasn't a solution. To them, it was proof that I was refusing the plan. Just then, Daniel walked into the kitchen. He glanced at the folder on the table, then at me. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue. Instead, he quietly turned around and walked back out without saying a single word. His silence spoke louder than anger. I drove home with the blue folder still sitting on my passenger seat. 2 days later, another unexpected visitor arrived. My father. His old pickup truck rolled into my driveway early Saturday morning. He climbed out carrying a toolbox. Without saying hello, he walked straight to my front porch. "This step's loose," he muttered. "It'll hurt somebody if you leave it." For the next hour, we barely spoke. He removed the old board, measured a new one, and hammered each nail into place with the calm precision he'd used his entire career. I handed him tools whenever he reached for one. It was the closest thing we'd ever had to a conversation. When he finished, he packed up his toolbox and stood quietly, looking across my front yard. Finally, he spoke. "Your mother's carrying more than you know." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" For just a second, it seemed like he was about to tell me everything. His mouth opened. Then he looked away. Instead of answering, he tapped the repaired step with the toe of his boot. "Keep the paint fresh," he said softly. Then he climbed into his truck and drove away. I stood alone on my porch, staring at the new board he'd installed. My father had fixed the step, but he hadn't fixed the silence, and deep inside, I knew there was one more secret my family was still hiding from me. The next day, I met my mother in a small conference room at my office during lunch. She looked exhausted. The confident woman who had spent months directing everyone else suddenly seemed much older. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, she folded her hands on the table. "So, your father told you?" I nodded. "He told me about the loan." She closed her eyes for a second before speaking again. "We were trying to save your sister's family." "I know." "You know?" she asked quietly. "Then you understand why we needed you." There it was again. Needed you. Not asked you. Needed you. She leaned forward. "If you sell your cottage and buy the larger house, Megan's family can move in. Your father and I can sell Warner Street, pay off the $85,000 loan, and finally breathe again." Her voice trembled. "One decision from you fixes everything." I looked at my mother for a long time. For the first time, I didn't see the woman who had controlled every family decision. I saw a tired mother carrying years of fear and guilt. I reached across the table and gently held her hand. "I love you, Mom." Tears filled her eyes. "But I can't become the plan." She stared at me. "What do you mean?" "I'll help. I'll always help. But I won't give up my home." Her face fell. "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying not like this." She slowly pulled her hand away. Without another word, she picked up her purse and walked out. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Megan. Attached was a screenshot of a reservation for a moving truck scheduled for Saturday morning. No explanation, no message, just the reservation. I didn't know whether she had sent it by accident or as a warning. Either way, I understood exactly what it meant. Saturday arrived. Instead of staying home, I went to work. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my elderly next-door neighbor, Mrs. Parker. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Claire, there's a moving truck in your driveway." My heart skipped. "What do you see?" She looked out her window. "Megan, Daniel, the children, and your mother." I stood up so quickly my chair rolled backward. "What are they doing?" Mrs. Parker paused. "Your sister is trying to unlock your front door." I knew immediately what key she was using. The spare key that had disappeared from the little blue ceramic dish during my housewarming party. Except 6 weeks earlier, I'd quietly changed every lock in the house. Mrs. Parker spoke again. "She keeps trying the key. It doesn't fit." I grabbed my purse and car keys. "I'm coming home." As I drove toward my little cottage, I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't afraid. I was simply done allowing other people to decide what my life should look like. For the first time in 34 years, I was driving home to protect something that was finally completely my own.